Hey, everybody, welcome to the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave, and I'm joined here with my co host. His name is Greg, and today he has a pen, and I'm not sure why.
You know what's funny? It helps me think.
A pen helps you think.
Holding a pen.
Oh,
It
and also, I should probably clarify that's not a vape pen in his hand.
no, I'm way too old and boring for that.
If you had a vape pen while we were doing our podcast, I would no longer have a co host on my podcast.
I know. Look, hey, I wouldn't be able to blame you. I don't understand it. I grew up in a time where you smoked a couple cigarettes and you tasted the tobacco. There was no smell of waffles wafting around. You know what I mean? Or
Strawberry cotton candy plus.
no, that's not. You're not doing anything bad. If you smell like blueberries, come on, cut it out.
Come on, yeah.
Come on, smoke a
Speaking
cigarette.
of
Anyways,
not doing
yeah.
anything bad, that's not what today's about at all.
No, no, it's not. I mean, I guess you want to get right in, and that's fine with me. We're talking about a cult again, which I really appreciate. And as I'm researching this, Dave, I'm listening to a lot while I was on the gym, while I was at the gym. And I think some free, pretty useful advice is if someone's ever calling themselves a god, probably want to watch out. It's probably a problem, right? That's like the ultimate narcissism,
It really
don't you
is.
think?
It really is. Hey, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
If you were listening, and this is not just about you, because like I feel like people do this often. If you were listening at any other location, would you have
Mhm.
mentioned it? If you were like going to Cumberland Farms to, just to grab some
Yeah, like a big
Reese's,
gulp.
a big
And
gulp and some
listen, I was
Reese's,
buying a Slim Jim, and this
and I
thing
was
really hit
I
me.
was listening to this podcast
Mhm.
while I was going into Cumberland Farms.
No, and
Well,
maybe I want to implant that in people's heads because honestly, look, I'm not in the best shape in the world, but I'll say this: going to the gym helps a lot. You know what I mean? Just like getting
or
that,
just
shaking it
doing
up,
some sort of physical
movement,
activity.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I need that in my life.
I do think it's funny though, because I know that's kind of a thing people do. They'll say like, "Oh, while I was at the gym, I was listening to this," but like that, I feel like it's also, I don't know. I think it's somewhat subconscious too. Like you
It
don't
might be.
even.
And here's the thing, like because of just either being at the hospital where we work together or teaching, it's kind of the only place I get to listen to the podcast, which was like a huge hobby of mine. Um,
I'm actually having a struggle right now too,
mm,
because one of my main ways of listening was like the morning walk I would take, and I haven't been doing that,
mm.
and my rides to work, but I've been wanting to just listen to music lately,
I've been listening to a
and
lot of music.
the podcasts have just like I sometimes want to, but I'm like I'm trying to get myself in a mood, or I'm trying to like do something to like get myself prepared for what I'm about to walk into in this work situation or whatever, or after work. I just need to decompress. I don't necessarily want to learn some days.
Oh, that's it too, because it's like when I've been putting it off a little bit, and it's like I just want to not have to feel like I need to stop it. And ooh, that's interesting. Let me write something down there. It's just, just like music is just let me get into this emotion and let me just relax a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need, right?
Maybe it's what we need, but I am having some judgment about it towards
Mm.
myself. I'm like, what's going on here? That you're a you're someone who loves to do this. You love to research. You love to, listen to podcasts even in general, just to, expand your surroundings and learnings.
Well,
And
look, if it's something you're noticing and it's something you're lacking, and it's something you know you used to enjoy, get back on that train, and I think I'll join you.
yeah,
So, and that's that's it, right? It's not an emotional thing. It's just switch it, and then that's it. It's a value of yours. Don't worry about what you're feeling, whatever. Just do it, right?
just do it.
You know what's interesting though? So, like, we were talking about a cult. Back to that, like, and I noticed researching this specific cult slash cults and the leaders. There's always this like charismatic leader, sure. And in most cases, and we can maybe talk about this later. There's this element of abandonment. And this discarding all responsibility that I think is really highlighted in this cult. And then when I'm listening to it or reading about it in this cult, I notice it in like across the board where people have left lives and children and jobs and responsibilities in order to follow this I don't know, quote unquote delusion. And in this sense, and in this particular case, I think we might have been dealing with someone who was dealing with like a delusion or a mental health disorder or maybe even schizophrenia and kind of just fell into the right circumstances. And instead of people like challenging, oh, I don't know. It's just like I feel like there was delusions and maybe some schizophrenia and it got validated as opposed to treated in a sense. And maybe we could talk about that down the road. But before we do that, Dave, and I would just, I know that you've got a lot and you've worked real hard and I've seen all your notes. And I just wanted to say something about cults before we get into this because I find this really interesting. Cognitive dissonance is something that's completely necessary in a cult. And the creator of cognitive dissonance was the psychologist from the 50s, Leon Festinger. And they saw, and it's relevant here because they saw this news story about a local cult, and there was this woman communicating with aliens, and the aliens were gonna take over the world. So Festinger gets his like little research people, and he's like, "Hey, listen, infiltrate this cult." So this happens a few times in psychology, Nellie Bly, like whatever. Whenever people are like, "Infiltrate this thing," the Hell's Angels, whatever, it's gonna make for an interesting story. Anyways, so they do infiltrate this cult because there's this specific date that the world's gonna end. Of course, we've seen this over and over and over again. The date comes and nothing happens. So you would think, or and they thought in the 50s at the time, oh, okay, well, cult over, right? Like there's no like why would it keep going on if they said this that world's gonna end this day? It doesn't. So everything you've been teaching us is wrong. But what really happens is the date comes and then nothing happens. The cult believes they somehow, I don't know, save the world or it doesn't matter. The researchers are baffled because the cult just continues to go on. And it's this cognitive dissonance is the idea that he comes up with, and it's this idea that we experience conflict in our world, we experience discomfort from that conflict, and the only way to kind of get over that, like relieve that discomfort, is to either deny it and kind of like lie to yourself, self-deceit kind of idea, or change the belief and start saying something new. So like they would have to be like even like Heaven's Gate, they would have to be like, okay, so this whole thing we've been doing, we gave up our families for, we changed our whole lives. That's not real. We have to shift and we have to do something else. It's way easier to just deny it and kind of tell yourself a lie than changing the belief because it's like almost nearly impossible, right?
Yeah.
And then I was also thinking, oh, Dave, you want to jump in on that at
Well,
all?
yeah, because so just, I
No.
mean, for anyone listening, the thing that Greg's talking about here, we've actually heard time and time again in all the tales
Mm-hmm.
of cults that we've gone over. I think I'm trying to think of a one that it didn't happen. I'm trying to think Waco probably didn't have a date that, came up, and I think they got to everything happened so fast with Waco, right? It escalated
Yeah.
quickly. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
think they got to the
Because of the
point
weapon,
where
on
they
account
had,
of all the weapons.
yes, exactly. That that
Yeah.
may have benefited their ability to, have a prophecy that didn't come true. And maybe even Jonestown. I can't remember if there was any kind of predictions
I
related to
think there
Jonestown.
was, and I think that obviously maybe killing them all prior to it was part of,
You'll
you
never
know,
know now.
yeah,
But we definitely
and then
saw.
what's interesting, Dave, is like everyone. So you talk about Waco, you talk about Jonestown. Those followers died believers. They died. We talked about that before,
Oh,
like the cult being true.
but Jonestown wasn't there some
Ooh,
starting to be some like tension,
yeah,
and so that was really important that it ended the way it did because it was probably going to be discovered to be kind of like a
yeah,
fraudulent group. But Waco, even Waco had some inner turmoil, I think, because
of
of
course, yeah.
Koresh's personality. But definitely Heaven's Gate had a lot of those moments like that you're describing where the group had to
Hmm.
say they either could have gone the path of being like, well, that didn't come true and now we're done, or we got to just move forward and reshift. And then they came up with new dates a lot of the times. And we just talked about it with Jehovah's Witness, which I
Yes, we
mean,
did.
we also kind of acknowledge maybe not a cult per se, but a group of people who at some point in time there was a prediction of when the end of the world would be or when the start of the of the world would be, and that kind of had to be shifted at one point when some of the predictions didn't play out the way they were supposed to, right?
Yeah, and almost like doing this research, it almost reminded me that in some ways Jehovah's Witness does feel less like I'm not saying it's not a cult, but it's certainly less of a cult and less extreme than some of these other cults that like that do these things, this isolation and like impair your judgment. Really, they really get to it quick, and the charismatic leader and all these things.
Yeah.
But it also makes me think of like I think it makes sense to talk about one more time that people who do join a cult are ultimately they're lacking something, and we're all lacking something. But with the cult, you have community and an importance and purpose, and ultimately, like it's fulfilling. It's like an upgrade to your life. And to leave the cult, you have to kind of give up those hugely important things, like community and feeling important and feeling like you're working towards something purposeful,
Right.
right? So it's way easier to double down on these beliefs than it is to give up that stuff. And I was thinking about it, and it's almost like these people are choosing these emotions, like that belonging, that need to feel like part of something over truth. They are, and that's the cognitive dissonance piece. Like on some level, they are choosing this over truth because I think somewhere in their brains they have to be saying, especially when you hear some of the things this woman says, like they have to say, they have to suspend belief and say that that truth that I know is not real somehow.
Right. I also was just reminded that
Yeah.
we did the Warren Jeffs cult, the Latter Day Saints, the fundamentalists. We also did that cult, and
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm ashamed to say I
Fundamentalist. Yeah.
remember very little of that cult. That's
It was a
probably
while ago.
it was it
I know he
last
had like
Easter? I think we
400,
did it.
he has so many wives.
Yeah, I
It may have been. It may have been.
think we did that for
It may have
Easter, to
been.
be
And
honest.
and you know, so like it was actually that was also another like really intense story. And what we're talking about, Amy Carlson here, and um, with the Mother of God, Mother God, love is one cult, right?
Love has
But like
won.
you're gonna get into that, and just love has one, yeah.
So
And
yeah,
this is just a woman who was a manager at McDonald's, right? Like, are you going to get into all of that? Like, because
no, I'm not going to get into any of
I
that.
think it's fascinating how the whole thing kind of starts. Okay, all right. Well, I mean, there's no reason to get into it too much, but
I was just kidding. Of
she was
course, I'm
a.
going to get
Oh,
into it.
okay, you are. That's facetious.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
Well then,
Greg.
without further ado, Dave, why don't you
Why are
kind
you
of
being weird right now?
lead us through this thing a little bit?
All right.
I'm not
So
trying to be.
you are though. All right. So, well, I thought the first thing that we could do is maybe just cover some of the beliefs of uh, the Love Has Won movement, also known or started as the Galactic Federation of Light religious movement, which
Yeah.
actually, this is the crazy thing about this. I mean, kind of like maybe a few of the other stories we told. I mean, this was a very recent thing. I mean, this was just in 2021 that Amy Carlson passed away, and the group didn't necessarily just end. They kind of repurposed or rebranded very appropriately, I would say you could call it. So, I mean, there's very good reason to believe that, some of these beliefs still are present somewhere. But it kind of combines new age spirituality with conspiracy theories and elements of mainstream Abrahamic religions. And
Mm. Like
basically,
Christianity, essentially.
sure. And the group
Yeah.
basically stated that Carlson was a divine. She was a 19 billion year old being who had birthed all creation. She had been reincarnated 534 times, a very specific number, including
Uh,
as Jesus, as Cleopatra, as Joan of Arc, in Marilyn Monroe, and would lead 144,000 people into a mystical fifth dimension. She had Go ahead.
yeah. So I just have to stop you there for a second. First of all, 144,000 sounds very close to the Jehovah's Witness thing.
Right.
Secondly, now this woman made those so if you hear someone say to you, Dave, face to face, I'm a 19 billion year old being, birth all creation, I can cure cancer with love. I've been reincarnated 534 times, friends with Jesus, Cleopatra. I am Jesus, Cleopatra. I hang out with Robin Williams, all this stuff. This is in the beginning. Like, is this a yeah, how is this not kind of shut down right away as like a delusional, sort of schizophrenic, scary person? Like, I don't understand how it gets beyond that. And it's fascinating that it's able to, you know?
Yeah, you have to find a very specific demographic that
I
will
know.
listen
I know.
to these stories and find them believable or, just interesting, fascinating enough. It's like anything, though. I mean, we
Well,
laugh about this. Well, I guess it's not like anything, but it's like some things where we can laugh about this, but then I mean, there was recruiters that went around telling people that a spaceship was going to beam them up, and they were going to go to heaven on a spaceship. So I find that less
it's
funny
true,
than
Dave. And most
this.
people did not identify with that too much, but you happen to.
Right,
Remember?
that's what kind of what I'm saying. Like, I mean, I didn't find that as like crazy as this, but I mean, other people probably hear that and they're like, what?
Yeah,
So I get it, but like I guess there's a thing for everyone.
sure.
So she had several romantic partners throughout the group's history, which also kind of uh, happened even prior to the group's history, as she was married 3 times. Um, but it began with her relationship with Amarith White Eagle, who
Mm,
was referred to as Father God, and he was basically her counterpart part in the theology of the group before he ended up departing. So yeah, they claim that Carlson was queen of the lost continent of Lemur. This is going to get even more crazy.
I know.
And that the group incorporated the belief that Lemur lives within Mount Shasta in California. She stated that Donald Trump was her father in a past life. It's funny because it's all these like dead celebrities and notable characters, and there's Donald Trump. Um, and that she's had spoken to the
Well,
spirit of deceased actor Robin Williams, who she claimed was Archangel Zadkiel. Zadkiel?
mm,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
There's a
I'm not
lot
sure,
of these
you
like
know, and
celebrities that she throws out there. There was Steve Irwin, like well, he's the what do you call him? The
the
crocodile
crocodile hunter,
hunter.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
A bunch of other
Crikey.
yeah, exactly. A bunch of other celebrities that Michael Jackson. These are all like gods in their theology, I guess you would say, or guides. Um, yeah, it's fascinating, I guess. They believe that the world was run by a cabal determined to keep the planet in a low vibration state. So yeah, and
Mm.
then they got kind of like they started to adopt the QAnon conspiracy theory stuff, and the members routinely expressed like speculation about the COVID-19 pandemic, which actually plays probably like a big role in some of her demise, which we'll get to a little bit later. They believe they were some of the people that kind of state that they believe the Sandy Hook massacre to be a hoax, 9/11 to be a hoax, the Holocaust to be a hoax. Um, yeah, they claim that the society has been taught about the Holocaust. Well, what they were taught about the Holocaust was suspicious, and that Adolf Hitler's intention was to serve the light. So some
Mm.
pretty crazy views here, right? Pretty like outlandish views.
Yeah, well, you lost me at like Atlantis and like, when they start talking about, Lemurians and like these ancient civilizations that are mythical. And maybe that's part of it, David. It almost feels like um something we don't get to do as adults. It's like grown up make believe, like fantasy in a sense.
Yeah.
People like leaving their own
Yeah.
like reality.
Right. And I think the crazy thing here is that when you step away from all of that, right? All of that stuff that sounds so outside of our typical beliefs. We go back and we look at Amy Carlson, and at one point she was a daughter. At
Mm.
one point she was a sister to somebody, just a typical young girl.
Pretty.
Um, she was pretty. Yep.
Mm.
She was born in 1975 in McPherson, Kansas. Her parents divorced when she was a child. They both remarried, and she was raised between their two homes in Kansas and Oklahoma City. Carlson had a sister named Tara, and at one point they left to live with the mother and stepfather after claims of the abuse by the stepmother. I don't have any details of what that abuse was exactly. The family later lived in a middle class home. I don't know why that's important that it was middle class, but that a middle class home in Dallas, Texas, and then they later relocated to Houston, Texas. Um, the thing, like I had mentioned earlier, by a certain point, she's already had three children with three different fathers. You know, no
Yeah.
judgment, but it's one of those things like, so when someone comes into therapy and we're asking them questions about like family history or even jotting their own history, we ask about marriages for a reason, right?
Yeah. Well, she's
Because
like, hey, 3 kids in 19 billion years. Come on, it's not too bad.
it cut me some slack here. Well, I mean, Michael Jackson was one of my kids, but
Yeah.
that was ages ago.
Yeah.
um so I mean, we asked that for a reason though, because that can also, like, in a very short period of time, that can tell us a little bit about relationship dynamics that might happen. I mean, what diagnoses do you think of when you think of like
Let's
frequent
not do
marriages?
that. Okay, well, not to offend, but I would probably think of borderline.
Right, borderline, even bipolar a little bit,
Bipolar,
kind of like
sure.
having manic
Yeah.
episodes and kind of making rash decisions or having real like intense conflicts in relationships, which could cause them to fall apart. So I mean, but those are just things to think about. It doesn't mean that that's something that she definitely had, but when you hear that and it's in a short period of time, it kind of makes you say, oh, I wonder what's up with that. She worked as a manager at McDonald's. What I did briefly catch of the documentary, I'll be honest, I didn't watch the full HBO documentary, which I'm kind of glad I didn't, because sometimes when you watch documentaries it can give you a really biased view of it.
Hmm.
So from what I do understand though, she was someone who's kind of motivated to move up. She liked the idea of having like a larger role in something, right? So getting like a managerial role at McDonald's for her was actually kind of a big deal. She enjoyed what that entailed.
Yeah. A little power.
Yeah, they mentioned that in her adult life she begins to get what quote unquote outlandish concepts about things such as like starships, and she kind of starts to be more curious about certain things that might be odd to others, right?
So this is where like I start to think that maybe there was something there, like a delusion disorder, or like maybe there is, maybe it was bipolar and this is like manic and she kind of like dips into psychosis, but it does sound a little delusional to start having these ideas of like that she's talking about. And all it took was someone to kind of be like, no, that's not strange. Maybe that's real. Maybe you should lean into that a little bit. And I think that's kind of like where the path changed, where instead of like looking into that, they kind of turned and kind of validated it and leaned into it instead of pulling away from it. You know what I mean?
Another concept that could be taken to consideration. So around this time she also had reported doing ecstasy
Mm.
and said that really changed the way she started to view the world, and she started to like see all the love in the world. I mean, ecstasy is one of those feel good things, right?
Yep.
You're rolling on good vibes, and
Yeah.
she definitely was. And there was a little sound clip of her kind of talking about her experience with ecstasy, and it really sounded like it was impactful to her. It also makes me wonder if through, I don't know how much ecstasy she started to use at that point or how frequently or what other psychedelics she was using, but it makes you wonder if maybe some of the brain chemistry started to change at that point as
Like a
well.
drug-induced psychosis, or even like dormant schizophrenia that sometimes we see in like
Mm.
rare cases with something like that can kind of unlock that.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I definitely think that there's a lot of different things to take into consideration when you look at her presentation. But let's just say her overall change was severe and significant enough that her whole family starts to recognize like this is not the person that
Hmm.
we once knew.
And that's how you
It's a
recognize
change.
psychosis too, right?
Right.
So it's like it's the person doesn't themselves say, "Hey, man, I'm like psychotic here." The people around you notice.
Yeah.
You don't.
Because for all they know, they're living their best life. They're having a great time.
Hmm. That's that ego syntonic thing,
Yeah.
right? It
Yeah.
feels right, even though it doesn't look right to the rest of to everyone
Correct.
else looking in. And
Correct.
it's funny, Dave, because it's like if you think of like even all like historical, and I'm not going to compare her to any like, like Jesus or Muhammad or anybody like that, but it's like they had to have those moments where like, what is being crazy? It's just to like believe something that no one else knows or believes or agrees with. And it's like, that would be how a religion, if has to start. Like if there was some kind of like prophet or real life kind of thing, it's the followers were all like, oh, they're crazy, but it's like, you know, we all
It,
kind of follow that same
oh,
sort of
think
guideline, right?
think about this. For someone to have this, like, all right, so if a prophet were to come, they'd be saying something very different from everyone else's beliefs, right?
Yeah,
What's a word that we would use for that? To be a radical beliefs. Isn't that word kind of like when we say that phrase radical beliefs,
radical. Yeah,
it's
not good.
it it means it's so different that it's like bizarre, right? Like
Yep.
radically different. It has,
But
but
we
it
would call
also
them grandiose too. We would call them all
grandiose.
kinds of
Yeah,
things.
there. But I mean, in order to be able to go up and present as something, you have to say something different. Otherwise, it's along the same lines of everybody else's train of thoughts. It has to be a radical belief in order to catch any attention, right?
It's wild that you have to think about it that way too. And if there was some kind of spiritual movement, and there was like this spiritual leader who was this, for a thought experiment. Like even if you think about it in terms of like the 1860s and it was at the end of slavery or something like that, and someone was like came down and was like, no, slavery is a true evil. And we all know that now and we all accept that now. But imagine if you were living on a farm and you were going to have to give up all your money and all your property and just kind of like lose everything. You might say like, wait a
That's
minute, that's the cognitive
wait,
dissonance there.
wait a minute. That's a radical belief.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, who's this radical? You know what I mean? It's like it's wild to think of um all good change has come from a radical belief at one point, right?
Yeah.
And
Remember the
you
new
you
radicals?
you got the music in you. Yeah, so yeah,
Right.
I do.
And that song was so radically different
I know. I
that it
know. It
made them
was
a
in
one
the
hit
music video
wonder.
was in a mall.
Yeah, they made
So,
them a one hit wonder.
yeah, it was pretty good.
All right. So early 2000s, she's, starts to get interested in all this new age philosophy stuff. And she becomes a poster in this website forum called dart,
Art.
dot org. And I mean, it's so funny when you think back to this time because like website forums and all that stuff. I mean,
Uh,
this whole thing is very heavy on website use of technology and websites and social media, but like early 2000s and you think about website forums, I mean that was huge back then. If you had a curiosity, you went to a forum to learn about something, right? So
true,
for
yeah.
people who are younger, you might not understand exactly how big website forums were at the time.
Yeah, and it's almost like these new cults have it easy.
Yeah. I
You
mean, I
know,
feel like when I always end up coming back to this. I remember when we did the Heaven's Gate thing. I remember their website very clearly when I was young because I went to it as soon as that happened and just like, and it
you
creeped me
joined.
out. But it looked like there all these websites that they used to use back then just had this like weird everything was like pixelated and just
Creepy.
weird art on it. It was very
Yeah.
creepy and trippy. But yeah, so they would go on here and talk about all the new age stuff. And it was basically for people to connect with other people they felt maybe shared some similar beliefs or were starting to question the world, existence. She was having an existential moment, right?
Crisis. Yeah.
Crisis, core crisis. So she meets this guy, Amaranth White Eagle, aka Robert Saltzgaver,
Yeah. If there was
who
ever a person to believe your like galactic story, it would be Amareth White Eagle.
yes,
Yeah.
and he's named that I believe because he has like a giant white beard and he's this older looking gentleman. I don't know
Hmm.
exactly how old he is, but he's the age gap between the two of them is pretty apparent, and he claims that, or he convinces Carlson that she is a divine, and she starts to claim that she's experiencing paranormal phenomena, specifically hearing voices that she would one day become the president of the United States.
Dude, that is schizophrenia. I'm
Right.
sorry.
Yeah. So, you think about this personality type where somebody is eager to advance.
Yeah.
They like the idea of having power, even if it's within a McDonald's, right?
Right.
Just that's already something that's within her, that personality type. Now She's starting to get into all this new age philosophy. She's finding people who are kind of also into it. Now she's finding a community. And then she finds this guy who just is like, I see something special in you. You're divine.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, maybe I am onto something.
Yeah.
Maybe there is something within me. So either she believes it or she starts to will it to be true. But either way, in late 2007, she leaves her third husband and her children and also her job. And she ceases contact with her family and joins Mr. White Eagle in Colorado. And they get married. I believe. I
Yeah.
believe they're married or they just have this like intense relationship. I'm almost positive they get married, but I could be wrong. I'm
So
pretty
like
sure I
in
saw a
that
wedding
moment,
photo
she
of the two of
she
them.
probably feels very misunderstood by her family, right? Like her family is just
Oh,
not buying into it. Her
I'm
family is
sure.
just not getting her at this point.
Yeah.
And so she has to make this decision. Like this person really gets me. I'm understood. It's almost like a, but it's definitely a moral dilemma, right?
Yeah.
Do I leave my family
Well, let's put it this way. The last time her family ever understood her was probably way before this.
way before this?
Like, because they were noticing and kind of commenting on the changes in her thoughts and what her interests were before that. So clearly, this was like a buildup of like they're increasingly more and more not with me and how I'm viewing things. So I have a choice to make here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, basically they start this group, the Galactic Federation of Light, and they post their first video to YouTube in 2009. And that's what I mean. Like this is all about social media, YouTube. It's very Twins Flame-ish. We also did Twins Flames. I totally forgot about that.
And they
Um,
mentioned twin flames in this, like there's that's a piece of this. It's almost like
yeah.
they grabbed from a lot.
Oh, White Eagle actually says it was like him and Amy were twin
Twin flames.
flames. Yeah.
Like
You're right. You're right. They
one
they
cult
do
at a
take
time.
well, and Twin Flames is very new agey too. So it
Sure.
kind of makes sense that they could be just referring to the term, I guess, instead of like
The cult.
the cult itself. Um, So, they have this really intense whirlwind of whatever they're experiencing. And then in 2014, it kind of comes to an end for them, White Eagle and Amy, as Eagle ends up leaving her for another light worker that he recruited from New York. But at the same time, Amy gains her first follower, which is Miguel Lamboy. And he ends up serving as the group's manager of logistics and finances. And he plays a big part in all this, kind of like pushing, the financial aspects of
Yeah, he's got a good like
things.
business mind,
Yes,
Miguel.
100%. And they begin to grow and just kind of go forward mainly by the internet. Um, and they travel a lot. They go between Colorado, Oregon, California, Florida, before they move to Moffat, Colorado. She has a number of partners throughout this whole time, um, which we will call father gods, and she ends up getting her final one in Jason Castillo, I guess you would say, in 2018. So he's the final father god that they have.
And the
Uh,
most handsome, in my opinion.
really,
Yeah.
you looked them all up. You want to judge the father gods?
Yeah, I had a who's hot, who's not of the father
Did
gods.
you really look up all the
No,
father
I
gods?
did look at all of them though to see who,
Wow.
I was very curious about what she looked like first.
And you
At
want to see
first it
like
was
what they
good
all looked like?
and didn't end too good.
Yeah.
Didn't
Yeah,
end too
she changes a lot even prior
She
to the
sure
group.
does.
So there was like early pictures of her where it was like that's the same person.
Hmm.
Her body shape changed a few times. Sometimes she was a little more heavy set. Sometimes she was actually like appeared to be rather thin.
Yeah, like she had anorexia like in the end. I mean, so there's tons of mental illness here.
Sure, sure. Kind of some quick overview of like more problematic stuff that happens. At one point, they moved to Hawaii in 2020, and they end up getting met with some hostility by locals there as she proclaims to be the Hawaiian goddess. I think you'd say Pele.
Yeah.
But that resulted in a multi-day protest from residents there, including lighting driftwood fires and chanting Hawaiian prayers around the property that the group was staying in. And it got to the point where the mayor actually had to intervene and negotiate the departure of the group from the island. They flew to another part of Hawaii, I think actually to Maui, but then eventually they were convinced to fly back to Colorado like a month later. So a lot of traveling in the group, which is something, we have seen before
Again,
in cults,
yeah.
right? It's that idea that like no place is really too permanent, except for like Waco. That they
Waco
look very
again.
permanent.
And you know what's funny is like, yeah, this has an online presence and everything like that. But like, I think at its most, it's like, what is there, 20 people in together,
Yeah,
like
it's a
certain.
small
So it's
small
small,
group.
you know? I mean, it's like you when you think about these things, and again, we'll talk about it, and not to like we kind of this has been in the news, but like we don't remember. It's not memorable, the cult itself. It's these wild deaths that make us
It's
remember them.
wild deaths, and it's also some of the really another like is I didn't even realize this, but this was actually on Dr. Phil. Group
Yes,
members were on Dr. Phil. She was on Dr. Phil. So I think those are the things that made it memorable. And it got a lot of coverage even in like different magazines and stuff like that, just because or
variety.
Vice did an article
Yeah,
about her with the products that she was selling. So some of like the scam aspects of it and yeah, a lot of that stuff got
that's true.
noted. But you're right. For the most part, I don't think people were talking about the cult itself. It was kind of just some of the bizarre behaviors that were happening
Bizarre behaviors and the abuse that happens that
and the
people come across.
abuse. So around the same time, like in September in 2020, she is reportedly in poor health, and that she's paralyzed from the waist down. And
Mhm.
she herself is starting to state that she has cancer. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. In early April of 2021, the group's located in an RV park in Northern California, but they were asked to leave due to overcrowding. And she was last seen alive by someone outside of the group on April 10th of 2021. So that same month that they had to leave is the last time she
Yeah,
was.
and so there's some accounts of people saying that at this time she was saying to the cult members, "Hey, listen, I know that I thought that staring at the sun was going to cure this, or I know that I thought that, I was going to cure something with love, but maybe I've been crazy this entire time, and maybe you need to take me to the doctors." But at this point, the members weren't willing to kind of, they were like, "Oh, this is heartbreaking. Like she's going to ascend into heaven or to a spaceship or to something." They would not or could not believe what she was saying, and that was their cognitive dissonance. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like they couldn't accept what she was saying, because if they accept what she was saying, then everything they believed was false, and if everything they believed was false, and they gave up everything in their lives, it's like that same old cult story over and over again. They have to perpetuate, they have to deny, because changing the belief is just something that's just
Yeah.
way too hard to face.
And even the Father God, he like was noticing some of the problematic things that
She
were
was blue.
present. Yeah, but even before that, he
Yeah.
noticed there was alcoholism present. She was basically drinking heavily every night.
Oh yeah,
He
that's true too. Yeah.
he was he would be able to find moments of like clarity where she would kind of acknowledge that everything was not real. But then he said it was like a blink of an eye, and then it would like just go back to the way it was.
Now, what do you
So
think how do you explain the constant drinking? For me, I was thinking of that too. It's like when she has the moments of clarity, I think she needs to drink to get rid of those. To
or
live her
yeah, I was
to continue
curious.
the deceit.
I was curious if the moments of clarity were happening when she was drinking, like she would
Mm.
kind of acknowledge it, or if it was prior. Yeah, that's a great question. I do think that the drinking was probably to mask a lot of the feelings that she was having, whether she was having guilt or whatever, or just to mask the feelings that were already pre-existing prior to
Yeah,
all
like
this.
a pain reliever, not only
Sure.
emotional pain, but probably at this point physical pain.
Yeah.
Just a lot going
And it
on
was
for
very
her.
contradictory because I believe that the group was not allowed to drink,
They weren't allowed to drink.
but she
That was
was.
that was against it, but she went for it daily. You
And
know?
and so this all culminates in this moment
Okay.
where on April 28th of 2021, so this is 18 days after her final like time ever being seen alive, her mummified corpse is discovered in the mission house um with like and it's suggested that it's been decaying for several weeks. So basically if the last time she was seen on the 10th, it was probably shortly after that. And on the 28th, it was a mummified corpse that they find in a bed. She was 45 years old when it happened. She was wrapped in a sleeping bag in Christmas lights.
Uh-huh.
Face is covered in glitter, and basically they made like a shrine for her.
Yeah, so this is the part that like some of this stuff where when you're isolated or when you're in these, these groups or these cults and everything seems to make sense and you have this dogma and this like doctrine that you've kind of come up with on the fly and it's made sense just so you could do these things to keep kind of perpetuating the lie, perpetuating the lie. And then you have something like this when the authorities show up and they see this sleeping bag with a dead woman inside and she's got glitter on her face and she's wrapped in Christmas lights. It must all come rushing back to you in a second and being like, holy shit, like how did it get here? Do you think like
Yeah,
there
I
must
don't,
be that like whiplash, I
you
think.
know, it's crazy because when they go to the door, because there's
Yeah.
this is on video. There's a video of the police going to the door, body cam footage. And the member, what does he say? She's resting or something like that. He says a phrase of what she's doing. When they walk back there and they pass by several of the group members to get to the back room where she is, and they do a close up of her face peeking out of that sleeping bag. It is the creepiest thing because, like, for a second, you don't even recognize that that's a human body looking
You,
at you.
you know what it reminded me of? I saw this too. It reminded me of the Carl Tanzler thing,
Oh yeah,
the paper mache
and
face.
the color threw me off because I was like, oh, it's mumma. It's is it mumma? Is that the color because it's mummified? But like, no, that's actually the color she was prior
Yeah,
because we there are pictures of her with her skin tone color looking different,
like blue.
like blue or silver, I guess you would say.
Yeah. That silver colloidal that like that's that new agey one of those supplements that you can take. It's supposed to be a catch-all for like any kind of but you're not supposed to do it every single day for one thing. You're kind of not supposed to do it at all.
Yeah,
But
she
I
was
mean,
ingesting large amounts of that colloidal silver, and they were promoting it as a COVID-19 cure. And you know,
dead at 45. That's
yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
So,
we're just
so when you consume it over a long period of time, it can lead to blue-gray discoloration of the skin, as well as seizures and organ failure.
yeah.
So she had her autopsy report stated that she had died from global decline in the setting of alcohol abuse, anorexia, and chronic colloidal silver ingestion.
So global decline. Here's something that's like a that's just an interesting way to put it, but there's this term that keeps coming up since I've been working in the hospital, and you've probably heard it because you've always kind of like had your mind in like it's almost sort of a medical world too, where it's like failure to thrive, right?
Yeah,
Someone out there living in the community who is maybe they're like living in squalor. We see the like hoarders maybe would be an example of that. We did an episode on that. But there's a ton of like eating garbage, not taking care of themselves, all these things. But maybe they're doing these things based on delusions and they're not right. Like mentally, you see it with schizophrenia, see it with a lot of different things, right? Um, this is what it sounded like for this person. This person was allowed to make decisions based on delusions, and it was never intervened. And so this is what you get dead at, you're dead at 45, which is kind of like horrible, right? It's almost like when like like if those families and maybe even a little bit with Jehovah's Witness where that like some of the modern medicine's not okay. Or like some treatments, whatever it is, but like where like blood transfusions and then like your kid would need that, or like say someone had diabetes and like their religion didn't allow for them to, have insulin or put
right.
inject stuffing. It's like that there's something wrong there. That's not okay. And I
Yeah,
don't really know what that is exactly, but like just allowing someone to live based on delusions instead of helping them out with that is very dangerous, obviously,
yeah.
you know?
So 7 of the group members end up being charged with abuse of a corpse, as
Mm.
well as child abuse because there was two children present on the property. Um, yeah, it and then so there's some photos from weeks prior that show her, and she's emaciated. She has thinning hair, and like I said, like this the skin discoloration was already happening at this point.
Right, right. She
She was
kind
like
of
a
looked
living mummy.
worldly, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so she became like that mummification was almost happening prior to her death. It's like She was
Yeah,
already shriveling up and
it almost sends the wrong message, right? Because like when I first looked sort of at the end result and it's a mummified corpse, you think like, well, what did they do to mummify that corpse? And it was like, well, nothing.
no, nothing
Just
at
the
all.
way, that just happened to be the nature of the way she lived her life and mummified her corpse in
Yeah,
life.
I mean I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little ignorant to how things actually mummify. I've actually ran across a few things mummified in my life, and I
Mm.
don't know how it gets to that
I did.
state.
I'm sure there has to be like a specific set of like environmental,
Sure.
conditions, right? Um, and maybe you have like a body has to be treated in some way. Maybe the colloidal silver or whatever the she was putting into her body had played a role in it. Maybe even the alcohol in some ways,
Maybe. Yeah, who
you know?
knows? Um so yeah, they let's see. Oh, this is another crazy fact. Authorities end up finding out that she hadn't actually died on the property they found her, but she died in California. Now, remember,
Mm.
I think I said she was in Colorado at this point.
Yeah. Road
So,
trip.
yeah, so she was in California, and they transported her back to Colorado. Um, and then after the death was publicized, the group's Facebook page stated that, like you had mentioned, that she ascended,
Mm.
and the website lovehaswon.org was taken offline. At this point, you know, that cognitive dissonance you were talking about, they got to
Hmm.
decide what they're going to do. Um, so the group splintered. That co-leader Jason Castillo that we were talking about forming, he forms a group called Joy Reigns, and opposing members taking control of the group's online activities, and they renamed the Facebook page and the YouTube channel to 5D Full Disclosure, and they launch a new website called 5dfulldisclosure.org, and
Wow.
that's where
5D.
me and Greg met.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And that's where we're like staunch followers. Oh God, that's kind of funny. Yeah, no, wild, right? And the cognitive dissonance is also in the post itself that says ascended. So it's like, oh no, we were right. All
No,
that worked,
that's
all that
exactly
worked
it.
out perfect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
That was supposed to
Oh, I can't believe
this
she made it.
45-year-old woman was
Yeah.
supposed to be blue and dead and on a road trip. No, like none of that was right.
Can't believe she made
Don't,
it.
yeah, thank goodness. You know
Like,
what I
and
mean?
also think about the self deceit that goes on with that train of thought. It's like you're convincing yourself that something horrible and tragic didn't just happen by telling yourself something good happened.
I know, like that denying truth is something we really gotta, that ability to do that. That's in like all that classic literature. I mean, we
Does
always go back to our old episodes, but
yeah.
the fall, like
Oh,
when you
okay,
think
yeah.
about the fall, like the ability, like that's the original sin, like the ability to deceive ourselves. That
Doesn't
is
it also make all those people that were present during that whole thing like total piles of shit? Like,
absolutely.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's fine. That was
And then they
supposed
have
to
to keep
happen.
that, they have to keep that up forever, and it's almost like, oh man, I don't want to
I
get,
mean,
they
we're
have,
trained in always finding like seeing the good in people and like being non-judgmental, but I have a lot of judgment for those individuals who
yeah,
witnessed this
they're
and
human.
then transition their thought process into this is exactly what she wanted.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
I know. It's wild.
All right. So
Okay.
a lot of other stuff was going on during this whole time of the group, right? Um, so there was a core group of this, like you said, it was a very small group. So it was 12 to 20 members that lived in Carlson. Um, and they did these daily live streams all the time on YouTube in order to recruit members and to get donations and to promote new age products. She was selling these like what were they calling them? Uh, there was a word for it. It was something like surgery, some kind of surgeries, like soul surgeries or
Oh
something like
yeah, and
that.
she also called herself oftentimes like a spirit doctor.
Yes.
And it's like, well, I don't think I
Oh,
need this.
I found it. It's etheric surgery, and
Mm.
it cost $88 per session. Very strange price. I actually read too that they were selling that colloidal silver product for $66.66. Like, where
Ooh,
were they coming up with these numbers
yeah,
too?
weird prices.
But yeah, the etheric surgeries they were claiming could remove sickness and negative energy from the body. Um, so they were basically profiting off of all these like supposedly healing things that have no evidence to be true or anything along those lines.
Yeah.
Um, but there
Yeah,
was
and like it's
go
like so
ahead.
they have to like carry out this person who's like passing away, and this person is going to tell you. It's almost like you go to get a haircut and the barber has just like chopped all hair out. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like you see her kind of like wheeled out there, and you're like, you better be 130 years old
right,
if
right.
you're gonna give me some surgery, some spiritual surgery, and
Yeah.
that's gonna remove the sickness. Otherwise, you would have removed your sickness a long time ago. Oh, unless she could like spin it like I take on everyone's sickness. Maybe I would believe that.
But she didn't say that, so
She didn't say that. She
she
should
lost that
have.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Ex-members of the group, they stated that there was some physical abuse, sleep
Mm.
deprivation, and various other things. That was kind of one of the requirements. They were like supposed to sleep for only like 4 to 5 hours per night. I feel like that was like causing sleep deprivation was probably done to help like make them their like thought processes and like judgment skewed, right?
Perfect. Yeah, like I mean, sleep deprivation, fatigue, mood change, impaired judgment.
Yeah.
That's those are the symptoms. So like the best thing like you and also apathy. I mean, think about it. You're so tired, you're like, I don't even care. Whatever, fine.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Intolerant of things that you because you just don't feel like doing anything.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
she was on some live streams and like yelling at a kid and kind of punishing them. And there was
Putting him like locking him in dark rooms for like periods of
yeah,
time.
they had like a
Very shit
timeout
like
thing
that.
that they would do. And yeah, so there was a lot of allegations about just terrible behavior. In May of 2020, there was a member that was found wandering in the wilderness, disoriented, naked, and dehydrated. And he had, after being described by the group as lacking the right energy and being on the wrong side of the mountain. Um, so they, as we mentioned, they also like they banned drinking and drugs for members, but she was accused of drinking quite a bit, as we know, and behaving very abusively to people. So she was like very often found yelling and angry, and just mood was all over the place, right?
Yeah, and like so the Dr. Phil thing, I wish I would have known about that sooner so I could have really kind of taken a peek at that. But that's still something I'm going to do.
Yeah, I started to watch a little bit of it, but I didn't have enough time prior to us recording today. But it was interesting to because so in the documentary, some of the members that are on there are also the members that are on the Dr. Phil show, and they're all very much believers in everything that is happening and has happened, and who Amy was as far as their mother and all that stuff. So there's so much here that like the people that were invested.
Yeah.
They believe this to their core, it felt
And
like.
I think we did a pretty good job of explaining why that would be. Even in this and in past cult episodes, like there
Sure.
is it it makes sense why they not only want to, they kind of have to at a certain point.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I'll let you kind of cover some final notes, but Amy's kind of a what's the word I want to say? It's kind of like a sad villain.
Hmm.
I don't know, and I even don't even feel good about calling her a villain. I mean, but
No,
she
because I
she
honestly
does some
think she
horrible
was mentally
things.
ill. I do
Yeah,
think she was
yeah.
mentally ill.
Right, right. It's I have a really hard time of like having full like having any full negative emotion towards her when I hear her story, just because as much as she's deceitful, as much as she's led people down the wrong path, and as much as she's done probably some pretty bad things
Yeah.
overall, the way she went out, it's almost like, wow, that's even for someone who's done all those things, I would hate that to happen to anybody.
Really, really bad. Really
Yeah.
young, really bad, really painful.
Yeah.
And it makes it's almost like when I was listening to some of these podcasts that were talking about this, listening to some of the interviews, and the way she like left her family in the beginning, it made me think of something that I think it was like early in college, like reading like Saint Augustine or something like that, and the idea of disordered love, and that's how he described sin, and I thought that was so interesting because it's not we don't have a good word for that in like secular life, right? And it's like she put her love for her own sense of well-being and need and over like her kids and her family, and that's like the love is disordered, right? The love for once you have kids and everything like that love needs to be almost paramount in my opinion, right? It needs to be over self. And I think there's something really powerful in useful about caring for things outside of yourself more than yourself. And I mean, whether you have kids or not kids, like, right? There's like something, and I think that's where values come in. And
Sure.
she was led, she missed the target in a sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you know
It
what?
it is
It's
very twin flames-ish because it felt like the members of Twin Flames, similar to Amy, their desire or their drive for um their own
yeah,
betterment, right? And their own advancement or
yeah.
their own ability to create something and be the leader of that thing, that overweighed and outpowered any care for anyone else, it felt like.
And like dark because it's under the guise of quote unquote love.
Yeah.
You know, like this how can love, it's almost once you say love, it's like, oh, this can't be too bad, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And but really, love is one of those things that's like creates every emotion in people. Anger, hate, jealousy, rage, like it's got all those things
It's the easiest market to tap into because it's the thing that every single person wants
it needs.
and needs in one
Yeah.
way, shape, or form, whether it's
Yeah.
romantic, family, friendship.
You
Just
know, and it's funny because I heard this other term too that like maybe we can use with like the most acute cases and the cases that are sometimes, you know, sometimes you have like a patient or something who is like hard, like they've done so much that's just kind of nasty in a sense, and you don't, I don't know, you don't admire them at all, and you're kind of like, I don't want to say don't like, but like, I mean, let's be real humans here, right? But I came across this like, you know, in kind of like trying to figure out how to deal with that. There's this idea of unmerited love where you like you give people that like unmerited love. And love is a wish, like I wish there was a better word for that, like unmerited, maybe compassion or I don't know. Maybe somewhere along the lines we can come up with.
regard.
Yeah, regard, right? Like unmerited regard is good. Where it's like I'm gonna treat you good despite you not meaning it, and then like let's see what that does for the both of us. You know what I mean? Like just let's just I want to be good. You need
Correct.
someone to be good. Let's
But
see what happens there.
isn't that person centered
I
thinking?
guess it's a little Carl Rogers. I
Yeah.
guess it is a lot Carl Rogers, right?
Because when you said that, I a person came to my mind and I remembered how much of a learning curve that was for me because he told me about some really uh, horrendous acts he had done to other people, and I sat across from this man and had to have demonstrate that despite these things you're telling me, here you are sitting in front of me, sharing me with me your story, and I'm not going to judge you. And that was a really hard thing, I think, to like understand, but like I got it in the moment what I needed to do, and I was able to do it, but that's not an easy thing.
It's not an easy thing. And it continues to not be an easy thing, obviously, if I'm talking about it. Like, yeah, it
Yeah,
continues to not be an easy thing. There's certain people who do something that's outside of your values, and trying to help them is hard. It just is. And so, but that's what we signed up for. It's not easy.
sure. And I appreciate someone who's not in our role being able to like try to do that. And I feel like that Jason Castillo was sort of trying to do that to someone who he also saw for who they really were. And I thought that was like interesting. Like he acknowledged he fell in love with her, and he said when he first met her, he wasn't really attracted to her.
Yeah.
And
And
then
he's like, she's
he
blue. I don't know.
this was prior to that. This is 2018.
Okay,
So this
yeah.
is this is earlier. But I thought that was interesting. He fell in love for her passion, for her her energy, her personality. And it became so intense that like he was able to see her flaws, want her to see her flaws so that she could better herself. And it was like, sort of that thing that we're talking about. He had regard for her, but he
Mhm.
definitely understood that there was some problematic things happening. I mean,
And
and
also,
whether
like when
that's
you're thinking about like
good,
terrible people, it's like if you just treat them like they're terrible people again, then what you're doing is not giving them any incentive to change.
someone has to break the chain.
Someone has to break it. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And like you want ultimately want people to change that need to change if they're, you know, doing things that
And it
really,
and it's such a fine line between being that person who breaks the chain and versus enabling though too, right?
yep,
You got to be
that's
careful
true
not to
too.
enable.
I know.
So
Yeah.
sometimes you do have to set a boundary and then stick to it if the person is not respecting the boundary. You don't want to let, you know, so long. I guess that's a whole other topic that we can get
It's a
into
whole
at
other
some
topic
point. But
that we've kind of like stumbled upon, but that's okay. Do you have any wrap ups?
oh, let's see. What's some of your final thoughts here?
Well, I
What do
mean,
you
I
got?
think honestly, I think we kind of hit everything pretty good. I
Okay.
really do.
We didn't,
I
the one thing we didn't talk about too much, and I just feel like maybe we can give it a little bit more time. Abandonment. You brought up abandonment.
yes, I did. Yeah. It's a through line in all cults, isn't it? Isn't it
It
like I
has
want
to,
to believe this is true? Yeah, yeah.
it
Like I
has
want to
to
believe this is true so
exist.
I can leave.
Yes. And
Yeah.
there's a few things that have to exist in order for a cult to like form and be solidified. And abandonment's one of those. Like they have to separate themselves from, I forget where I learned this. I learned this in one of the cults we were researching, but at some
Mm,
point they have to separate themselves from their prior lives, right? And that is what we see here, that detaching from family, from known contacts.
yep.
The cult starts to seclude you. They make rules that prevent you from being able to engage in all that. But it's interesting too, because like the person that does this, that engages in this, that
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's something like imagine me and you, we get an opportunity, we find a cult, right? And we're like, oh, that sounds nice. And we just
I like that.
decide to leave our entire lives behind and join this cult. It kind of sounds exciting.
It
Like,
does. It
right?
does.
If
Yeah,
imagine
and
if
like
we actually didn't like some
right.
elements of our current lifestyle.
Yeah, and you're like you can ha like I can't get out of this unless right? It's like something like this is like almost biblical or once in a lifetime or I have a moral obligation to do this. I have to do this. So you convince yourself of that. Also, it's and then there's that thing that we were talking about before where like changing your whole belief system is almost impossible, right? But then you do that for the cult. You're good luck changing it back to what you were, right? Because like you've given that whole thing up, you've changed it, and now to go back is tough.
Yeah.
So the abandonment piece, I think you're right. I think that has to be on some level a part of it, either forced or voluntary, right?
It makes
One
me
or the other.
wonder what abandonment experiences Amy Carlson had when she was younger that made her be able to engage in something like this because she starts it right for the
Oh,
group.
the
She
fear
kind
of
of
abandonment's there, obviously, and unless it's like, and look, we don't know anybody unless we know we don't know her whole story. We don't know the circumstances of each of those relationships. But like you said, three marriages suggest some type of fear of
yeah,
abandonment.
yep. And we know there
I
was a
mean,
divorce. We know that at some point she had to stop going to her dad's and stepmother's house because of the abuse allegations there. So who knows what sort of stuff started to develop during this, development time and how that translated into future Amy. So just interesting stuff to think about. Fascinating story and pretty recent.
pretty recent.
2021, not that long ago for all this to, and then, recent enough where there's plenty of footage of interviews and stuff like that that you guys can, well, especially the Dr. Phil one probably being the most prominent. And then obviously that documentary, which you can find on HBO Max, which will give you a lot more detail about this. But, prior to actually, this was like our Mother's Day episode. So I didn't know any
Yeah.
of that stuff prior. Just knew that they had Mother God was part of this. And I was like, oh, that sounds fascinating.
Happy Mother's Day. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Also my birthday.
is Mother's
So
Day?
not really, but like right around there. My birthday's Monday.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Mother's Day Sunday, my birthday always gets trampled by Mother's Day. So
Mm.
just so you know.
My birthday always gets trampled by Christmas. So yeah.
Yeah. That's tough too.
Well,
That's worse
that's why
probably.
we're so giving to others. We're
That's
used
right.
to not
Like
being the
whatever.
center of attention.
Yep. Happy Mother's Day, everyone. Never mind me. I blow out the candle and the cupcake for myself before I go to bed.
Yeah. So yeah, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. Don't leave three kids behind. Enjoy your
No,
family
try to.
and try to, and don't turn your skin color blue,
Please.
please. Um, Also, what you also should do though is join our Patreon,
Mm,
right?
I agree with that.
Cruel words have never been said. Am I right? Or am I right?
Yeah.
So if you join our Patreon, guess what? You can just
Bonus.
subscribe,
Bonus.
or you can subscribe to our bonus tier and you can get Greg's.
Bonus episodes.
Yeah, that's right. So join, check out those bonus episodes pretty soon. You're going to also have access to backlogged episodes that aren't available to everybody else. And it's a super cheap rate. And we're going to keep improving it and adding more to it as we go along. But we're in the early developments of this Patreon. But we would love to see people join and just appreciate and throw out ideas and want to build a community on there. So also there's like, I think there's a forum that you can probably comment on, and maybe you'll
Yeah,
find another Father Eagle or whatever his name was,
or
and you
why not?
can, run away with him. Don't do it though. We'll tell you not to, but you could if you wanted to.
Run it by the
So
forum, which
yeah,
right now is probably consists of Dave and I, and we'll kind of give you a heads up.
and our buddy on there. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. No, Patreon, and then Apple Subscribe is another way to be able to hear the bonuses, but you can't watch the videos of them on there. And then if you guys can rate and review our episodes or our podcast on the streaming platforms, that'd be super appreciated, because that is what helps us spread and be more accessible to the general public. So all those things are great. We appreciate you. We love you. Happy Mother's Day. Love Dave and Greg.
Love Dave and Greg. Thank you.
See you later.
See you later.